The U.S. car market is unraveling in ways most people never imagined. For decades, the dream was simple: walk into a dealership, test drive a shiny new model, and drive home with a manageable monthly payment. But that dream is collapsing. Consumer Reports, the name Americans have trusted for generations, just fired a warning shot, so alarming that insiders are privately comparing it to the months before the 2008 financial crash. And make no mistake, this isn't some distant problem for Wall Street or auto executives. Families across the country are already feeling the ground shift beneath them. Buyers who once drove off the lot with affordable SUVs are now walking away in disbelief, staring at payment offers that ballooned from $400 to $650 almost overnight. Dealers with once-packed showrooms are watching inventory pile up, while buyers, locked out by soaring interest rates, cling desperately to cars that should have been retired years ago. But here's the part that mainstream headlines aren't telling you. This collapse doesn't stop at dealerships. It's spreading like wildfire through the economy. Banks are seeing alarming spikes in loan delinquencies. Repair shops are overwhelmed, with customers waiting weeks or even months for parts just to keep old vehicles running. Entire communities built around auto plants and dealerships are bracing for layoffs that could hit harder than anything seen in over a decade. What's unfolding isn't just a car market slowdown. It's a perfect storm that threatens to reshape how Americans move, spend, and even think about ownership itself. And the first dominoes? They've already fallen. The question now is how far the chain reaction will go. At the start of this year, the U.S. auto market looked strangely alive. Showrooms were buzzing, buyers rushed in, and for a brief moment, sales numbers surged. It wasn't because cars suddenly became affordable. It was because people were scrambling to beat looming tariffs that threatened to send prices even higher. That panic buying wave created a short-lived spike, the kind of artificial boom that made headlines and reassured automakers that demand was still strong. But the surge was a mirage. As soon as the dust settled, the bottom fell out. By summer, sales were plunging into double-digit declines. Dealership managers, who once had waiting lists for trucks and SUVs, suddenly found themselves staring at 3 months' worth of inventory, collecting dust on the lot. The so-called post-pandemic demand that executives banked on evaporated almost overnight, leaving behind lots full of vehicles most buyers simply couldn't afford. And while mainstream outlets brushed it off as a seasonal slowdown, the truth is far darker. Consumer Reports revealed that what we're seeing isn't just a dip in sales, it's the beginning of a structural collapse. Prices, interest rates, and miscalculated production strategies collided all at once, creating a perfect storm that the industry isn't ready to face. The party ended months ago, and now the hangover is starting to hit hard. The collapse of the car market isn't just about fewer people driving off the lot. It's about affordability being completely obliterated. The average new car in America now costs nearly $49,000, a price tag that would have sounded insane just a decade ago. And even if you could stomach that sticker shock, the financing makes it nearly impossible. Average monthly payments are hitting record highs around $750, a 50% jump in just 3 years. For millions of families, that single number is enough to lock them out of the market entirely. Interest rates have turned what was once a manageable car loan into a financial trap. Borrowers who could secure a 3% rate in 2021 are now being quoted 7%, 8%, sometimes well into double digits. That difference might not sound like much on paper, but in reality, it pushes car payments hundreds of dollars higher every month. For households already stretched thin by housing, groceries, and healthcare, that extra cost is devastating. And it's not just buyers who are suffering. Automakers themselves bet big on high-margin trucks and luxury SUVs, thinking Americans would keep paying top dollar forever. Instead, they're now sitting on billions in unsold inventory that few people can afford. While cheaper, fuel-efficient models fly off lots the moment they arrive. This isn't a short-term hiccup. It's a structural mismatch between what manufacturers built and what consumers can realistically buy. What we're seeing now isn't just a slowdown. It's the unraveling of a system that was already fragile. And the next cracks are starting to appear in a place few expected. Inside the used car market, where buyers once found refuge. For years, the used car market has been the safety valve of the American auto industry, the place buyers turned when new cars became too expensive. But that safety net is breaking. The average used vehicle now costs around $25,000, nearly as much as a brand new car cost just a few years ago. Financing isn't much easier either. Loan rates for used vehicles are often even higher, pushing monthly payments into territory once reserved for luxury cars. For many buyers, the affordable alternative doesn't exist anymore. That's forcing Americans to hang on to their old vehicles longer than ever before. The average car on U.S. roads is now over 13 years old, a record high. But keeping an aging fleet alive has created a crisis of its own. Repair shops across the country are overwhelmed, with wait lists stretching weeks, sometimes months, as parts shortages collide with skyrocketing demand. A single failed transmission module or sensor can sideline a car for months, leaving families scrambling for rentals they can't afford. And the costs are brutal. The price of major repairs has surged by more than 30% in just 2 years, forcing many households to make an impossible choice: pay thousands to keep an old car running, or drive it into the ground and risk being stranded. Some are already maxing out credit cards to cover repair bills, trapping themselves in debt just to stay on the road. This repair bottleneck is exposing just how fragile the system has become. When people can't afford new cars and can't keep their old ones running, mobility itself turns into a crisis. And the ripple effects are starting to reach far beyond garages and dealerships, straight into the heart of the financial system. When cars stop selling, the shock doesn't end at the dealership door. It slams straight into the banks that finance those sales. And right now, lenders are seeing red flags everywhere. Auto loan delinquencies have climbed to their highest point since the aftermath of the 2008 recession. Families who stretched to buy during the pandemic boom, or who financed vehicles at record high prices in 2021 and 2022, are now struggling to make payments as interest and inflation eat away at their budgets. Repossession lots are filling up at a pace not seen in years. And here's the chilling part: it isn't just risky subprime borrowers anymore. Even prime customers, people with stable jobs and good credit, are defaulting because car payments that once looked manageable have ballooned into something unsustainable. Banks are being forced to tighten lending standards, raising down payment requirements and cutting approval rates. That makes it harder for new buyers to qualify, which means even fewer sales, which only makes the cycle worse. This spiral is toxic. As lenders become more cautious, the value of cars already on the road starts to erode. Used vehicle prices, which soared during the pandemic, are now falling at a rapid pace. That leaves millions of Americans underwater, owing far more on their loans than their cars are worth. Consumer Reports estimates that tens of billions in auto loans are already sitting in negative equity, a number that analysts warn could rival the early stages of the housing crisis. And once financial confidence breaks, the damage spreads quickly. Banks don't isolate auto loans from everything else. When they see defaults rising in one sector, they pull back across the board, tightening credit for mortgages, credit cards, even personal loans. In other words, the collapse of the car market isn't just a problem for drivers. It's a direct threat to the financial lifeline of millions of households. But that isn't the end of it, because as money dries up and lending slows, the collapse starts hitting the workers and towns that keep the auto industry alive. And that's where the fallout turns from numbers on a balance sheet to something deeply human. Behind every number in this collapse is a worker, a family, and a community bracing for impact. Across the Midwest and the South, America's manufacturing backbone, auto plants that were running overtime just 2 years ago are now cutting shifts, scaling back production, or shutting down entirely. Industry reports estimate that tens of thousands of auto jobs have already been lost in the past year, with many more hanging in the balance as sales keep sliding. For towns built around these factories, it feels like deja vu. In places like Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky, workers who lived through the brutal layoffs of 2008 are now watching history repeat itself. Assembly lines that once provided steady paychecks and middle-class stability are slowing to a crawl. Some plants have gone from 5-day weeks to 3, with rumors of dropping even lower. Families are pulling kids out of college, canceling medical treatments, and preparing for layoffs that many fear are inevitable. And it's not just the assembly lines. The auto industry's supply chain stretches into steel mills, glass manufacturers, parts suppliers, and tech companies. When automakers pull back, those businesses feel it instantly. One part supplier in Michigan admitted orders are down nearly 40%, forcing them to lay off a third of their staff. These ripple effects devastate not only the workers, but the small businesses in their towns, restaurants, stores, even local schools that rely on steady paychecks circulating through the community. Every closure sends shockwaves far beyond the factory gates. Dealerships slash staff, repair shops struggle to keep up with shortages, and entire regions dependent on the auto economy find themselves teetering on the edge of recession. For the millions whose livelihoods are tied directly or indirectly to cars, this isn't just a market downturn, it's a threat to survival. And yet, the scariest part is this: while workers are already feeling the pain, the collapse is also reshaping the entire value of what Americans own. Because next comes the problem that hits every driver, whether you've bought a car recently or not. For millions of Americans, the car in their driveway isn't just transportation, it's one of their most valuable assets. But that value is evaporating at an alarming pace. Used car prices, which skyrocketed during the pandemic, are now falling so fast that entire loan balances are collapsing with them. Industry data shows wholesale values dropping by double digits in just 6 months, and retail prices sliding right behind them. That's created a devastating problem for anyone who bought at the peak. Negative equity. It means you owe more on your car than it's worth. Consumer Reports estimates that as many as 4 in 10 loans issued in 2021 and 2022 are underwater. Imagine buying a vehicle for $35,000, only to discover 2 years later it's worth $25,000, while you still owe $32,000. Trading in or selling isn't just impossible, it would cost you thousands just to walk away. This trap is locking families into vehicles they can't afford, but also can't escape. Some are making payments on cars they no longer want, or can't even reliably drive, simply because selling would mean swallowing a massive loss. Others are forced to extend loans out to 6 or 7 years, just to keep monthly costs within reach, creating a cycle where the car will lose value faster than the loan balance can shrink. The danger goes beyond individual households. When millions of drivers are stuck with negative equity, it drags down the entire market. Dealers can't take trade-ins, buyers can't move into new cars, and lenders are left with collateral worth far less than the loans backing it. It's a slow-motion spiral that looks eerily similar to the housing collapse of 2008. Only this time, it's playing out on wheels. And just like the housing crash, the consequences don't stop with assets losing value. Because when the foundation cracks, the ripple spreads into the very core of the economy, affecting jobs, credit, and even the cost of everyday goods. The auto industry doesn't exist in a bubble. It's one of the largest engines of the U.S. economy. So when it sputters, the shockwaves spread everywhere. Right now, those ripples are already being felt in housing, retail, finance, and even the price of everyday goods. Economists warn that as many as 500,000 auto-related jobs could be at risk if the downturn continues. Every one of those lost paychecks means less money circulating in local communities, less spent on restaurants, small businesses, and real estate. Housing markets in car-dependent regions are already softening. Cities like Detroit, Toledo, and Louisville, where auto employment is concentrated, are seeing home sales slow and prices flatten as job insecurity grows. For banks, rising auto loan delinquencies are a red flag, and they don't just tighten standards on car loans, they pull back across the board. That means fewer approvals for credit cards, personal loans, and even mortgages. In short, if you need credit, you'll feel the effects of the car market collapse, whether you're shopping for a vehicle or not. Then there's the hidden cost. Transportation underpins nearly every industry. When shipping companies face higher repair costs, part shortages, and pricier vehicles, those expenses get passed directly to consumers. Groceries, clothing, furniture, everything that travels by truck becomes more expensive. That's why analysts call the car market a leading indicator of the broader economy. When it falters, the rest of the system starts coughing too. What we're watching isn't just an auto slowdown, it's the early tremors of a larger financial quake. And yet, while most sectors brace for impact, a handful of surprising winners are quietly emerging from the rubble. Not every corner of the car market is collapsing. In fact, a few unlikely players are thriving while the giants stumble. Compact cars and fuel-efficient sedans, once dismissed as relics in an SUV-obsessed market, are suddenly in demand again. Models like the Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic are selling almost as soon as they arrive on lots, while oversized trucks and luxury SUVs sit unsold for months. Automakers that kept faith in affordable cars, especially Asian brands, are gaining market share as U.S. manufacturers scramble to adjust. Another group cashing in on the chaos: subscription and car-sharing services. For people locked out of ownership by $700 payments, the option to pay monthly for access without a massive loan is becoming more attractive. Some regional subscription companies report growth of 30 to 40% year over year, fueled by drivers who still need mobility. but can't shoulder long-term debt. What was once seen as a niche experiment is quickly turning into a mainstream lifeline. Even the used market has its winners. While late-model cars are plummeting in value, well-maintained older vehicles, 7 to 10 years old, are suddenly hot commodities. They're cheaper to buy outright, simpler to repair, and less tied to volatile financing. Repair shops that specialize in these aging workhorses are booming, hiring more mechanics and extending hours to keep up with demand. It's a strange paradox. As the traditional model of ownership stumbles, new ideas and overlooked vehicles are stepping into the spotlight. But these bright spots don't erase the bigger picture. They only highlight how deeply the old system is breaking, which leads to the real question. If car ownership as we know it is collapsing, what does the road ahead actually look like? The signs are clear. The U.S. auto market isn't just hitting a rough patch, it's changing at its very core. For decades, ownership was king. You bought a car, paid it off, and drove it for years. But now, that model is crumbling under the weight of record prices, crushing loans, and shifting consumer priorities. Younger generations, facing remote work, urban transit, and environmental concerns, are openly asking, does owning a car even make sense anymore? Industry analysts believe we're on the verge of a long-term transformation. Automakers may be forced to scale back oversized SUVs and return to building practical, affordable vehicles. Subscription models, car sharing, and even on-demand transportation could grow into mainstream alternatives. At the same time, EV adoption is creating a new set of challenges, from charging infrastructure to battery costs, that will determine whether the next generation embraces cars or leaves them behind. For manufacturers, it's a survival test. Those who adapt quickly to the new reality of affordability, efficiency, and flexibility may thrive. Those who cling to the old high-margin playbook risk being left behind. And for consumers, the choices ahead may look nothing like the market we grew up with. The very idea of what it means to own a car is being rewritten in real time. But even as the industry shifts, one truth remains. When the auto market falters, it drags the entire economy with it. And that's why Consumer Reports' warning wasn't just about cars. It was about the financial foundation of American life. Remember where this all started. Consumer Reports, the trusted voice that's guided Americans for decades, issuing a warning so severe it compared today's market to the days before the 2008 crash. This isn't just about high sticker prices or rising loan rates. It's about a system unraveling, families trapped in debt, dealerships shuttering, workers losing their livelihoods, and the ripple effects hitting every corner of the economy. The collapse of the car market is a story of affordability destroyed, confidence shaken, and an industry forced to confront its own mistakes. But it's also a glimpse into something bigger, the possibility that the way Americans move, work, and live is entering a new era. Ownership, once the bedrock of the dream, may be giving way to something entirely different. So the question isn't just whether the U.S. car market is collapsing. The real question is, what rises from the wreckage? And when the dust finally settles, will we look back on this moment as the end of an era or the beginning of one we never saw coming?